Hey everyone, it's Brenda back again with another episode of the Three Uniques podcast. Today I have on Chelsea Quint. Hi Chelsea, how are you doing today?
I am fabulous and very excited to be here.
So for everyone listening, Chelsea and I met in a course that we did, I want to say about a year and a half ago, I think, Trauma of Money. Great program if anyone is looking to release some trauma associated with money, like many of us, especially I would say women in business, not to generalize, but coming into it. And a lot of my audience are definitely in that category. So, and it comes up quite a bit in my client conversations as well. So that was kind of how we got connected.
Yeah, it was absolutely an incredible program. And similarly to what you just said, I think any of us entering a business, running a business, have our own money stories. No matter how healthy of a relationship you had growing up with money, there is so much money stuff just comes up. And especially I find that if you are starting a business and you've entered the coaching space, you're looking for support, you're looking for mentorship, money mindset work is likely to cross your path. And I'll speak just from my experience, not universally, but I found in the early years of starting my business, I did money mindset work. I did a lot of the courses. I went into the manifestation world and dipped my toe in there. And I had some beautiful revelations. I had some shifts, but I was always missing a lot of it, which over the years come to find, okay, right, the somatics, the body piece, the nervous system understanding, all of that we learned in Trauma of Money felt like so much the missing puzzle piece to a lot of the work I'd done and been circling and been trying to figure out. So It was an incredible experience, and yeah, highly recommend Trauma of Money and all that they do.
And you are, I should have said this earlier for everyone listening, you are a trauma-informed business coach. So this obviously plays really well into, I would assume, the support that you're giving to your clients in the business coaching area of your work. Trauma-informed. So I kind of know what that means, but I don't want to necessarily say I'm an expert in it. So what does that mean?
So essentially being trauma-informed, I'll give you the little framework. First, a very important disclaimer. It does not mean necessarily that you do work with trauma, that you help with trauma resolution, that you are therapeutic in any sort of way, right? You could be a trauma-informed plumber or mechanic, right? You wouldn't expect them to resolve your trauma.
After doing some home repairs last year, it would have been nice in some cases to have a trauma-informed plumber.
That's what I believe
that trauma.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly at the crux of it. And I believe deeply that trauma-informed basics, we would live in a better world. I don't love a should, but we would live in a better world if trauma-informed basics was a part of our, I don't know, grade school curriculum. And it honestly can be that elementary. It really could be taught in grade school curriculum. So essentially, what being trauma-informed means, a framework to use, is it means that you have the ability to identify and recognize the symptoms of a trauma response.
Okay.
So that's part one. You can recognize it.
And trauma response being fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Like when you see someone going through that, you know that yourself when you go through it, and you can recognize in someone else. Okay.
Exactly. And recognize, even if you can't name, they're having a flight response. And here's what that means. Their heart, you can recognize their body language is closing off. They are breathing faster. Their voice tone has gone up or down. Their eyes are glossed over. There are a lot of more physiological symptoms, honestly, that you will see that, frankly, most of us as the human animals that we are, do recognize, but we may not necessarily connect the dots between, oh, my partner and I are having a conversation and I can see that they are beginning to have a stress response. But when we start to add this language to it and do a little bit of trauma-informed education, we can start to see, oh, this client in front of me, the person in front of me who I'm here helping with their home repairs, is seeming a little shut down. Maybe I can consider, how can I respond? So understanding the symptoms, then being able to have a plan to address the symptom in the moment. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean trauma work.
Right.
This doesn't mean let's unpack it and now I'm your plumber and your therapist. That's not it.
Okay, good.
It means that you have, if that's a set of skills someone wants to combine, I don't know, there could be utility. But it means that you have simple tools at your disposal.
Mm-hmm.
One of the simplest ones is understanding co-regulation, which is a fancy word that essentially means if your nervous system is sitting across from my nervous system, your body is sitting across from my body, and my body starts stressing out, my body is still gathering information and tons of cues from your body.
Right.
And if you are okay, if you start slowing down your breath and taking a deeper breath, if
Mm-hmm.
you start speaking a little more calmly, my body will pick up on those cues and start to calm down. So breath techniques, very, very simple practices that can help someone in the moment if they're having a stress response. Taking a deep breath together is a great one.
Right.
And then the third piece is having a toolkit and a process to refer people to get additional resources. That might be something as simple as knowing if you're talking to people in your area,
Mm-hmm.
what's a good resource to find therapists in your area? What are online resources? What are hotlines?
Mm-hmm.
But having that information ready and knowing when someone has a stress response, I will first take deep breaths with them. Once we're more calm in a better state, I will say, hey, I'd love to help you find additional resources for what came up for you. Are you open to that? Here, and go into kind of here's your toolkit. Those three pieces are a very basic level of trauma informedness. That's the kind of run of it. Yeah.
And so do you find that when you're working with business owners, business leaders, and you're coaching them, that you being a trauma-informed coach, individual is particularly helpful when entrepreneurs, business leaders are going through some type of trauma response?
Yes. 100,000,000%.
Kind of a loaded question. It was a loaded question. I'm like,
yeah.
yes.
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes, which is part of why I lead with that and what I call myself. Because this honestly started in my own personal experience of starting a business. I, in the early years, was really focused on learning strategy and learning processes and learning all of the more analytical, masculine, if we're looking at masculine versus feminine energy, looking at all of these things I would learn in business school, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
I was looking at all of that and I found some success, but there were still so many parts of my business that felt sticky and hard and I couldn't and scary. And I got to this point a couple years in where I was relatively successful. I had replaced my full-time income, if nothing else. And it was before I was 30. I was working for myself, hadn't had to get another job. So successful in many ways, but I was terrified of my business.
Right.
I was so scared of it. And the facilitators, the mentors I had hired, it wasn't that they weren't compassionate. It was that there were times when it was illogical to them, as it is illogical, if I was incapable of sending an email or setting a boundary with a client.
Right.
It was true for me. I couldn't do it. But the people who were supporting me didn't have the support, which is where I started to see, okay, maybe the work I've done, the care I've received for working with my trauma in more of a therapeutic sense, could be useful. So I started looking at all of these pieces, and essentially what I've come to understand, which I think is really intuitive, it makes a lot of sense once you hear it, but it felt like a light flipped on for me when I realized this, is that your nervous system is all of ours are designed to keep us safe on a very foundational level. That's the point. Things that are new or different are less safe because they are new, different, and thus unknown.
Yeah, and the way
So
our brain typically loves to operate is, oh, that new thing is going to cause some type of pain, or it's going to cause a lot of effort. And why do we need to put a lot of effort in, Brenda, when we could just do it the way we've always done it? But
yeah,
now
we're
you want,
here, we're safe.
yeah, but now you want to create something new and different. And then the other thing that it also repels against is that sort of delayed gratification. Like if I can't get it
Correct.
instantly, why are we bother doing all this work? And there's going to be some pain involved in it. Forget it. I'm out. And it sends all those
Mhm.
like triggers, right, that are unsettling in our body. Do you like, because I like there was something you went back and you talked about sort of the conventional coaching, like, it's like conventional business coaching where it's like, here's another spreadsheet, here's another launch plan, here's another swipe file. Oh, you have trouble sending out that email? It's okay, just plug and play my email swipe file template.
Template.
Should help you out. And those
Mhm.
things do help. I've used them, I've downloaded them for sure. When I'm stuck and I can't necessarily articulate my thoughts and I'm just got
Yeah.
so many things on my to-do list to do, it's nice to have those handy tools and guides and just like get it done fast. But I often find too, the thing that I've observed in my business is whenever I sort of default to those things first, before checking in with my nervous system and getting regulated, even though I managed to get out those 20 emails or whatever my to-do list said I was supposed to do, and I feel
Mhm.
like a check mark. Did I get that many clicks on the emails? Did I get a lot of response on the emails? Because I think the reality is that people can start seeing through that. It's like I'm just operating on the surface. It's like kind of plastic. It's like it's not really the heart of Brenda. And maybe
Yeah.
if I actually kind of worked on my nervous system a little bit and maybe then sent out the email saying, you know what, I was like struggling to send this email out to you guys, but I'm going to do it. And here's some of the stuff I was going through this week. And would you like to hear how I got through it and how I explored it and what I learned as a result? And now this is what I'm doing in my business. Would that be a helpful tool for you? Let me know.
Exactly. And that is one important contextual note.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone not everyone has a personal brand or has a brand where they want their name, their life, their stories to be a part of the brand. And so that is certainly
Sure.
a consideration,
Right.
right? On whether that kind of approach that you just laid out is going to work for your brand. And one thing I am so opposed to anything that is cookie cutter. It's
Mm-hmm.
one reason I have a lot of trouble with swipe files,
Mm-hmm.
because, and with the rise of AI and everything, so much of it sounds cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
And I want your artistry. I want your creativity. That's what I want from a brand. But what I want from a brand doesn't have to be what your brand is. So
Right.
that's
Yep.
one
And
side
and
note.
that's even the whole premise of the Three Uniques podcast is there's 8 billion people on this planet. There's a lot of people that you can get swipe files from or unique support from. It's up to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and what you touched on, whether you have a personal brand, you want your stories and your voice to be a part of your brand or not.
Mm-hmm.
I was with family last week and my uncle asked me what I have noticed. Are there particular businesses that you've noticed that are thriving right now of
Mm-hmm.
your clients? Who is really succeeding, who is not? And I had to think about it for a moment because I work with people across industries and I haven't noticed a particular industry that is thriving relative to others. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there are, but that's in my microsphere of data. Um, but what I have noticed and what I think we're going to continue to see is that the business owners who and the teams
Mm-hmm.
who lead with what feels human, who lead with their humanity,
Mm-hmm.
are the ones who are really thriving because there is so much fatigue. I don't think the Amazons and the Walmarts are going to go away,
No.
but there is so much fatigue
Yeah.
from those giant businesses that they feel robotic, they feel
Mm-hmm.
plastic, they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel human. And the folks who are still sharing their humanity, their stories, truth in a way that it isn't manufactured authenticity and unfiltered
Right.
nonsense, that is a lot of what is really, it's building a relationship with your customers
Mm.
that is based on truth, that is based on shared humanity. And that is something that I think has been continuing to grow in value from a business perspective over the years, but
Right.
is really, really, really growing even more this year and beyond.
One thing that I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit about fear of rejection. I saw you do a post about that, and just, I mean, it happens. And you even shared a personal example. And that's, I think, that humanity piece where it wasn't like you're like, oh, here's my top 5 tips to resolving fear of rejection. You were like, I was rejected. Client, unsubscribed from my email, unfollowed me on social media. Like, you went through the whole thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, Chelsea, I feel so bad for you. And then I'm also like, okay, it's not like, but also I've been there. I've had, clients ghost me, and I say ghost, and it's just like, that's how I labeled it to make myself feel better at the time. And maybe how I'm even saying it now. Realistically, people are busy. Stuff comes up. Maybe they had full intention of wanting to still continue to work with you, but things happened. Things happen in people's lives. Talk me through that, like with business owners, like how do we get through that fear of rejection? Like, we worked so hard and we delivered such an amazing thing, we thought, and somebody rejected us.
So I think first, maybe one day I will reach a point of enlightenment where I will get over the fear of rejection and it will not be present, and I will not dance with it.
That's also maybe part of it. Is like, you just won't, like, it's a mountain with no top, right? Like, you'll just always have this fear of rejection. That might be in itself like calming. It's like, I don't have to beat this thing.
No. And again, maybe you'll get there. I don't know anyone from any level of success. I know no one who is like big example, huge example. I love giving examples that are just so massive that it feels so relieving. So, fun fact, one of my cousins is, this feels so name droppy, but whatever. It's not intended that way. It's just genuinely one of my cousins won an Oscar a few years ago for Into the Spider-Verse. He's an amazing director. He's wonderful. Wow. Yes, he's great. And his nervousness and fear of rejection about pitching a new project or making a project, like peak of his career.
Right.
The nerves are still there.
Yeah.
The pain is still there. We had dinner the other night, and there were talks about rejection and feeling awkward.
Okay. All right. So, Brenda, give yourself a break.
Please. Yeah. And also, if there's any voice in you, in any of us saying, I won't feel anxious, I won't feel afraid, rejection won't bother me once I have blank. I don't know, y'all. I'm not sure that's it.
That even in itself is a trigger. I won't get over this fear, or I will get over this fear of rejection once this happens, right? Once I sign 5 more clients, I won't feel rejection anymore. And I think, like, your cousin's a great example. I was listening to a podcast with Brendan Fraser the other day about winning an award for The Whale. And we haven't seen Brendan Fraser in a while. And now he's come back and he won an Academy Award. And everyone's like, oh, you must have like 1 million scripts being dropped off at your door front. And he's like, no, actually, it's pretty quiet right now. And I was like, oh, buddy, it's okay. It's all right. And it's just like, it's a natural human reaction to feel bad for somebody. But at the same time, it's just like, it's, again, not in an acceptance or an acquiescence, but like, there is going to be more rejection with more success, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of it is kind of about a numbers game. And I don't want to say that in any way that purports hustling and just, I immediately think of multi-level marketing and like cold pitching a bunch of people. That's not the numbers game I'm talking about.
Okay.
But the numbers game of how many times can you get back up from the day when you post about your new group program and you are so excited and the graphics are gorgeous and you're obsessed, and the language, the copy, you can't handle how good it is. This is the best thing you've ever made. And it's gonna sell out on day 1, like everyone you've seen on Instagram, and
Sure. Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
And then no one signs up on day 1.
Tumbleweeds. Yeah.
But you've still got 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 7 days, however long your launch period is. That's the numbers game. I mean, how many times can you get back up? How quickly can you get yourself back from the devastation And for maybe it's not that for you. For me, it feels like devastation. I feel heartbroken at times, depending on how much I love what I'm selling.
Mm-hmm.
I feel heartbroken. It feels personal and it hurts. That said, the work for me is not about making myself wrong for hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I do that, then immediately I have a different problem to focus on. I now have to focus instead of how do I create content for Instagram, write my next email, do the next part of this launch.
Right.
Now I'm focused on Chelsea is broken. Chelsea has this fix the pain. Now I'm distracted, have to talk to my therapist, not focused on the launch. So for me, immediately, there is nothing wrong with you for feeling hurt.
Mm-hmm.
All that shows to me is that you are right on target with alignment around your purpose and your passion, because the fact that you are that hurt means you care that much about the offer.
I love it. And so keep caring is really the message, like you want to continue on with, like, keep caring.
Keep caring. Keep
Mm-hmm.
caring is a huge part of it. And then the second, the sort of how-to piece, how do we do this, is
Mm.
that instead of, if it's not about fixing or not having pain or not having fear, what it is about instead is increasing your window of tolerance, a term we know from the trauma of money
Yes.
framework. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, what the window of tolerance is your capacity to experience an intense sensation or emotion.
Right.
Can be really, really wide, or it can be really, really narrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are really, really, really ticklish. So they have a very narrow window of tolerance for being tickled before
Right.
they, like, it's too much for their body. Some
Yeah.
people aren't really ticklish at all. They have a wide window of tolerance for being tickled. What we want to do through regular nervous system tending,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry about the dog.
It's all good.
But what we want to do is increase your window of tolerance for dealing with the sting of rejection.
Mm.
And what that takes is reps.
Reps.
So that's reps, exactly. So that's where, again, it is a bit of a numbers game.
Mm.
How many times can you show up, post the thing, and get crickets?
Right.
Invite into the program and not have someone sign up on day one,
Mm-hmm.
and still keep going and get yourself back to a point of, that hurt. Okay. And it doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean I'm doomed. It doesn't
Right.
mean I'm not meant for this. Maybe once you have a little more clarity, a little distance, you can go back and do a post-mortem review. I'm a big fan of a post-launch review.
Yeah, sure. Just check in, like, where did you start seeing like a disconnect, or like yourself being like deregulated, right? It's like, oh yeah, this is when I started tuning away or disassociating from the launch. I was like already starting to give up on it. Yeah.
Right. And then can you see that in your content? Even if you
Mhm.
can't see it, did other people feel it? Probably. We are,
Right.
even if we can't name it, we are so sensitive to one another and
Mm-hmm.
to reading the subtext. It's in there. And
Mm-hmm.
so looking at that information, what can I learn from this data about the launch? And how can I document that and apply it moving forward is beautiful. But that's only after you have enough distance to say, this doesn't mean I'm doomed. This doesn't mean I'm ruined. My business can still succeed.
Mm.
Once you have a little more space, you feel a little more relaxed. Maybe you do it with a friend to help co-regulate, or a coach or a partner with you.
Yeah.
But it's not about fixing. It's
Mhm.
about widening your window of tolerance so that you can shorten the time gap between pain, fear, pain, rejection, and okay, I'm
Yeah.
back in. I'm
And
back in it.
and this is where I think the whole sort of like buffering, right? Pushing it off. We have to be careful of that, because just as much as we don't necessarily, I mean, like, who wants to necessarily stand in a puddle of rejection every single day? Because you're talking about reps. But you're right, because every time we push it off or buffer it with something, going down the Netflix rabbit hole, alcohol, sugary snacks, whatever the thing is that, you like to buffer with. And again, not judging people, but just know what those habits are. I have them. Everybody has them. We're instinctively, through our hormones, like set up to, look for them with cortisol and stuff. So just know that that's how your body operates. And what is it like? That's what I love, the window of tolerance. It's like, okay, I could default to eating that chocolate bar and zoning out on Netflix for the next 3 hours. Or what does it feel like to just sit there maybe with my journal and, like you said, go through the analytics of the last launch and see where I disconnected, right? Where I just sort of fell off and feel that rejection for a few minutes. And then the next time, widen it. So just feeling it versus defaulting to the buffering.
Right. And reminder too, that just like you can, I don't want to be too like nervous system, make you scared of your nervous system, but just like you can put reps in to expand your window of tolerance, it can get narrower. Just like your muscles can either grow or atrophy, same deal with the plasticity of your nervous system. And it's not like if you can watch Netflix. Netflix can be a coping tool. It can be there.
Yeah,
so don't never watch Netflix
and you can have
or have the chocolate
bar, and you can have the bag.
Right.
It's like, it's fine.
Yes.
It's just
but exactly, right? There's naming what it is, knowing what it is, and making it an intentional choice, and knowing that if that becomes the default, and then that stretches from the 1 day to the 3 days to the 3 weeks, that's where we are going to see it's going to be harder to start again if you've waited 3 weeks than it is going to be if you get back in after 3 hours or 3 days, right? So recognizing you get to use those tools that are maybe not the most growth inducing.
Right.
But using them mindfully. And I love, maybe, can you spend 3 minutes in your journal before you get the 3 hours on Netflix? Can you give yourself, like, it can be 2 reps. It can be a little tiny little bit of reps.
Yeah.
But that will make a difference in the long term.
I love it. So how do your 3 uniques play into what you do as a trauma-informed business coach?
So I think, this is such a lovely process, and I am obsessed with what you created. I absolutely love the 3 uniques. It's gorgeous. The whole workbook, I had such a blast going through everything.
Awesome. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you. It was lovely. I am such a wordy person that it is hard for me. But I think what it all really boils down to for me is that I incredibly value, and I remember where this came from. I incredibly value contribution and service. Those have been ride or die with me for as long as I can remember. And I do remember very specifically at about 13, telling both of my parents, I said something to the effect of, you guys realize you've kind of ruined me for normal life, right? Because and it was actually in a sort of gratitude way, but it's, I was 13. What do you want from me? So we were at the time out west in California. I spent my summers growing up driving cross country and working at a therapy intensive camp for kids with autism and their families that my mom and dad started in my brother's memory. And so we were at this camp. I was about the time where I started working in the therapy room and being an assistant and helping out. And the fact that I recognized by that age that normal people, quote unquote, normal people with quote unquote normal jobs didn't get to drive with their pets and children around the country to run different nonprofit camps for 3 months out of the year, 2-3 months out of the year. And I recognized that it wasn't exactly quote unquote normal to have the kind of soul moving experiences that I had every year growing up.
At such a young age, and a formative age. Formative,
absolutely,
a bunch of years. Yeah.
Why the camp started when I was 5. So
incredible.
Very, very, very formative time of my life. And so that sense of you've ruined me was essentially, I can't work a quote unquote normal job without asking a lot of questions. Like,
Mhm.
explain to me why 2 weeks is what I get for vacation. It was HR had a blast with
Oh my gosh,
me
you're a
when I
troublesome
worked in an
employee right
office.
off. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely was. And I helped people negotiate their salaries. That's when I found out I was good at coaching. HR did not love me. Um, but I realized that seeing the way that my parents created this massive impact
Mhm.
on not only the folks on the autism spectrum, but on the entire family unit.
For
And
sure.
then seeing that ripple effect of the therapist who learned there and brought it back, it was just absolutely, it was inspiring to me, but it was also one of those, they're my parents. So that's the air I grew up breathing. That's
Right.
normal for me. And so for me, when I entered the coaching space 8 years ago now, um, there was a lot of noise about how quickly you could get rich.
Yes.
And that noise has not dissipated. I see
No.
less of it because I've edited my sphere, but that
Yeah.
noise has not dissipated. And I'm not going to sit here and say I was above it from day one. I had student loans and credit card debt from being in my 20s and financially irresponsible.
Mhm.
I'm not even going to say that. From having no education and falling prey to 0% interest for 2 years. I was like,
Right.
yeah, I'll pay that off. Absolutely. I did not. So I had student loans and I had this credit card debt, and seeing people talk about making $30,000 in one launch, I was like, that would change my life. That
Mhm.
would so I was absolutely drawn in to some of that make money quickly, how quick, blah, 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 that had very little focus on quality of work, integrity, some
Profitability.
profitability, even.
Because
Exactly.
like
There were
I love the $30,000 launch, but if it cost you like 24,000, it's like
That's a $6,000 launch.
it's a $6,000 launch. Yeah, exactly. Which is
Mm-hmm.
still a good amount of money, but it's not $30,000 net. Like, or like,
Yes.
it's gross and minus expenses and all these other things, right? And yeah. So there's a bit of a fallacy. So how did that affect
There's a
you
huge
as far
fallacy.
as a contribution and service, like seeing all of that?
That is how I have differentiated myself,
Mhm.
at first very unintentionally,
Right.
but I found myself the way that I started out as a health coach.
Okay.
And because I was already teaching yoga, started out as a health coach. And the way that I started moving into business coaching was that I was in group programs trying to figure out, how do I succeed in this industry, right? Doing the things
Mhm.
many of us do. And I organically, it's the same thing that happened in my one and only corporate job. I organically, by virtue of being me, would get into conversations with people about their messaging and their businesses. And
Mhm.
a lot of times it would start from the space of like, I'm not really feeling great about the kind of chase money thing from the facilitator, from the person we're learning from, or this kind of, I didn't feel great about when they told me that, or I don't know about that advice. And so people would come to me, and there were at times very scary moments of like, am I going to get in trouble? Because I did in the corporate environment. This was not good when people came in and asked me to help them negotiate. But I realized not only that my commitment to contribution and service was valuable, but that I'm actually good at a lot of the business pieces.
Mhm.
I've picked up a lot over the years that I've worked with other businesses before I
Right.
started my own and got successful. And I was getting people better results, delivering better experiences than many of them were from the programs they were paying to be a part of.
Right.
And many of those people have come back and stayed clients over the years. People who I've met in programs have wanted to
Mhm.
hire me. And that is true, that similar kind of pattern of, I show up to an Instagram message. I show up when I happen to run into someone when I'm out at a restaurant and they want to talk about their business idea or this other business, or my friend needs to work with you.
Mhm.
I show up from the place of, I genuinely love business. I love creative visionaries and helping the puzzle of it. And so it is delightful for me to show up in a space of contribution and service.
I love it.
And that has grown my business tremendously. People love to refer to someone. It's grown it massively in ways
Well,
that
I think what I'm hearing from you is, and you mentioned this earlier, the difference between sort of like the masculine, the traditional business approach. We need women, and whether or not you identify fully as a woman, not you specifically. I know you've got she, her, but anyways, besides
all
that,
good. I'm with you.
but we need more women voices out there talking about business. So many of the textbooks, the way we've grown up in business, whether you've got a corporate business background and then got into your own business, or again, you're learning from other coaches that are still presenting those as being the tried and true methods. Yes, they work. Of course they work. We've seen businesses over the last like 30, 60, 100 years use those type of formulas. And of course they work, but it's not the only way. And, you know, and I think when we see more women nowadays going into business for themselves, because that's the other reality. If we go back and look at the legacy of our mothers, grandmothers, great grandmothers, et cetera, what were they doing in businesses? They didn't necessarily have like online businesses that we see now. So we don't necessarily have that as sort of like that sort of legacy mentorship that we can go back to. But it wasn't like they weren't in business. Like if I go back to my mom or my grandmother, my great grandmother, I mean, my great grandparents had a family store. You know, they grew their own apples in their orchard out back. They lived in the house that was part of the store. Like it was like the corner store. It got bought out by Safeways, whatever. And then they still stayed in real estate. And my great grandfather, like managed the building, did all the plumbing. My great grandmother, like sewed the drapes and polished the floors, but they ran that business together. Did she identify as being like the COO and he was the C? Like, no, they didn't have those titles back then. And so you would say that she didn't have an entrepreneurial background, but that's like totally opposite. It's like, no, if I look back now, it's like you were damn straight, you're an entrepreneur and you did all of that. But I think we default to the textbooks, which are mostly written by men. We're now starting to see more women come out in the last like 10 years. But we have this like evolution of a generation of like, there's another way to do business. There's another way to get the result that you want to get. You want a 6-figure business, great, but you don't necessarily need to, like we said earlier, you don't necessarily need to hustle. So I love the fact that you're also working with leaders to look at those possibilities, people that have tried those methodologies, and not to knock those coaches that are still working on them. They do work,
Yes.
but there may be also other tools. So you're giving options to people, which is amazing. And then you're being, like you said, in contribution and of service.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that I want to just one brief piece about, again, in no way, shape, or form am I ever knocking anyone I've worked with, anyone who is using any of those strategies. I don't think the problem is with any individual coach or creator or business.
No.
Problems come from the way systemically that things have been done. And the reality is that I'm speaking in broad strokes. And so, of course, we're going to miss some things when we're not speaking in more nuanced terms. But business as it exists up to this point, they were built to create profit.
Right.
That is not inherently bad. Profit is great. It's a very important, you should be making a profit if you have a business. And when that is the primary single pointed focus, it's really challenging, if not impossible, for that not to become exploitative, whether it's exploitative of your employees, your workers, your customers, and or the planet. And that's a lot of why I think we're seeing a lot more attention paid to traditionally marginalized folks, particularly women, but we're seeing a lot more attention paid to other ways of doing business, because more and more people are seeing, you know what? It works. But we also need to redefine what we mean by works. It works to generate profit.
Well, and it works off of a value system that was really the only value system, which was capitalism, right? But now there's other value systems where it's just like, you know, teach one, you know, be one, like all these type of things where it's like, I'm not going to necessarily just you know, and what does profitability look like? When I work on profitability with my clients, before it used to be like, oh, well, your business needs to be like 18%, 23% profitable. I'm like, well, what happens if you take out money to pay yourself, take out money to pay your expenses, your employees? You've also got, you're taking out money to give to a local charity that you support, if that's something that's important to you, put money into your investment portfolio. And at the end of the day, your profitability is actually at 5%, but you've done all these things with your money that you've been generating in your business. It's just a different way of looking at it. Cause some people will be like, well, no, maybe your profitability was at 20%, but you put all these things into different interest groups, et cetera. I'm like, yeah, but it's a different message. It's like, no, I'm going to give this money before I have anything else that's extra. Right. And I've hit all these different layers. Right. And I've done the right things for my people, my team, my community.
Exactly.
Special interests I want to support, whatever that looks like.
Right. Right. And that's one thing I generally, a kind of big concept that I will bring in a lot is whether your business is regenerative. And essentially, this typically comes out first when we're looking at pricing. I don't know about your people, but pricing is something that I have, my people generally struggle with. What price do I set?
Right.
And so one of the many lenses that we look at it from is, what number do you need in order to feel regenerated for your intellectual property or your time or your labor or your all of the above? What do you need to feel regenerated? And that is unilaterally, I look at that inside of all business practices, right? If you're thinking about running a group, how many people can you hold in there with this framework to still feel regenerated? How much time do you need between sessions to be regenerated? Right. And it's something that when you build that into the foundation of your business, you are looking at building something that is long-term sustainable, which is a much, at least from my vantage point, I'm not sure that I'm right, but this is my vantage point. It's a much more sustainable approach. It's much more enjoyable, and it is much more likely to give you an end product, an end business product that you love showing up to. Obviously, there will be hard days and all of this, but when you really focus from day one on regeneration, you're going to be looking inherently more through the lens of what matters the most to you, right? For folks who have kids, time matters to all of us, but especially the people who I work with who have kids, time with their kids unplugged is one of the most precious commodities they have, often more precious than money. Right. And yes, so you need money to have leisure time and all of these things, but we have to look at that multi-layered mosaic of values in order to have a business that really feels like you, that really feels nourishing, and that is really long-term sustainable. And that's going to go beyond looking at 20% versus 5% profit. It's just not, we can't look at that. It's what we can, but it doesn't give us the full picture.
Yeah. Love it. Where can people spend more time with you? Where can they find you?
They can find me at chelsea.quint, Quint, on Instagram, and chelseaquint.com. Those are the main spots.
And what have you got going on right now that people could learn more about and work with you on?
So two big pieces. If you are interested in widening your window of tolerance, I have a resource library. It is called Regulation Rituals. It is a library of resources divided into the primary categories that I have seen entrepreneurs struggle with again and again and again. So this is based on the conversations I have had with my clients over the last 5 years that keep coming up. Right. I have built practices for each of those moments. So you can kind of have a coach in your pocket. Yes, Voxer and all of that is amazing. And being able to, at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you wake up from a stress stream about how your launch is going, press play on the ritual for that and be able to give yourself some peace. So Regulation Rituals is something I'm absolutely obsessed with. And then I have a small group business accelerator called Momentum.
Okay. Awesome. So people can reach out to you. Chelsea, I've got one last question to ask you. If I was to give you a billboard, and it could be anywhere in the world, what would you put on it and what would it say? Oh, sorry. What would you put
think
on it and what you would say is the same thing? And where would it be is the last part of it.
I figured that was the question. I was with you, totally with you. You know, I think I would really have to focus on nervous system regulation, right? At the top of our conversation, I should mention that I think trauma-informed curriculum should be everywhere. And
Mhm.
essentially the reason I'm such a nerd about nervous system regulation and so passionate about it is that when you are outside of your window of tolerance, you lose access to your frontal lobe, the center of this part of your brain that governs creativity, logic, decision making.
Mhm.
And
Love.
whether or not you're an entrepreneur, love, connection, like
Yeah.
all the goodness, all of the juice. And
Mhm.
so, whether or not you're an entrepreneur, I think it would just have to say breathe, deep breaths, breathe.
Okay.
I'd go multimedia billboard,
Yeah.
and it would have, the graphics that will kind of grow bigger, like a circle that grows
Mm.
bigger on the
Yeah, yeah.
inhale and will shrink on the exhale, because it actually helps with the regulation piece, a little billboard co-regulation moment. So I think it would be a breathe moment. And I feel like, oh, I'm so torn. I think I would probably, can I pick two places?
Okay.
Okay, okay. I think I would put it on any of the major LA, like on the off the 405 in LA, one of the
Okay.
major freeways that has like 18 lanes of traffic and
Wow.
traffic is gnarly.
Yeah.
And then I would probably put it in Times Square because New Yorkers need a regulation moment often.
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 Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Good locations. Very good locations. Chelsea, it's been great having you on, hearing about what you do, and love hearing your perspective. And I'm excited to have people follow you and check you out. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
And remember, everyone, I always say this at the end of my podcast, get out there and share your three uniques. There's 8 billion people on this planet, and somebody needs what you've got. Take care, everyone.